In the tangled web of betrayals, revelations, and shifting allegiances that define Port Charles, the events of June 24 offered another blistering chapter in General Hospital's ever-expanding saga. The day began with subtle whispers of power and sabotage but erupted into dramatic confrontations, public humiliation, and the unraveling of carefully constructed lies. At the heart of it all were schemes quietly laid and loyalties tested, as various players found themselves navigating the treacherous terrain of truth and perception, with life-altering consequences looming just beyond the next revelation. Lucy, ever the opportunist, sat down for what appeared to be a casual lunch with Jen Sidwell and Marco Rios, but the subtext of their conversation hinted at far more dangerous undertones. Lucy's interest in brokering a peer deal, one that was already slipping through Sidwell's fingers, spoke volumes about her instincts for power grabs. Though she tried to make herself indispensable, Sidwell revealed to Marco once Lucy had stepped away that Sonny was no longer a threat to his father's ambitions. His cryptic tone didn't just suggest closure, it sounded more like a warning. Sidwell didn't want to get drawn into Sonny's work, but he made it clear he would if circumstances forced his hand. That single statement alone hinted at a storm forming on the edge of Sonny's empire, one that even he might not see coming. Elsewhere at the Metro Court pool, the idyllic backdrop did little to conceal the building tensions between Portia and Jordan. Their long-standing resentment finally erupted in a raw exchange over Curtis's failures as a husband and father. Jordan, wary of Portia's constant blame-shifting, called her out for being the architect of her own misery. That brutal honesty pushed Portia past the edge, culminating in her throwing a drink directly into Jordan's face, a gesture that symbolized years of resentment boiling over in a single, humiliating splash. Isaiah, watching the fallout, stepped in to mediate, but the friction only underscored his growing realization that his hopes for a relationship with Jordan may be just as complicated as the world she inhabits. In that instant, he saw clearly that Curtis wasn't just her past. He was a shadow that still colored her every emotional decision, and perhaps always would. Meanwhile, Trina's innocent afternoon at the gallery took a darker turn when she confided in Curtis about what Kai overheard, namely, Curtis's shady dealings involving Jacinda. Curtis downplayed the danger, casting it as a protective measure for Portia, but Trina wasn't convinced. Though she promised to remain silent, it was clear that she was disturbed by how deeply her father was entangled in something so ethically murky. When Curtis later met with Portia, she was eager to pick up the fight about Jordan, but he immediately deflected, shifting the conversation to his hopes that Trina and Kai would stay quiet. For all of Portia's anger, she sensed something was wrong, but Curtis wasn't about to admit just how much of the situation had spiraled out of his control. The real center stage was occupied by the press conference, where Drew attempted to rehabilitate his tarnished image, only for the entire event to backfire spectacularly. Tracy had doubled down on her accusations, claiming Drew had planted ketamine in her car as revenge. But Cody's unexpected arrival turned the tide, at least temporarily. By admitting that he had borrowed Tracy's car during an emergency surgery for one of the Quartermain horses, and had accidentally left behind a vial of veterinarian-prescribed ketamine, he effectively cleared Tracy's name. Holding up a crumpled prescription receipt, Cody tried to paint the picture of a simple misunderstanding. Martin, sensing an opportunity to create doubt, speculated that the receipt could be forged, but Tracy was already moving to authenticate it. Yet just as the tension peaked, the press conference devolved into farce when Martin tripped and fell in front of the media, injuring his back and drawing uncomfortable laughter from the crowd. While Cody's admission seemed to temporarily clear Drew's name, the optics were a disaster. Tracy, exonerated, sneered that Drew need only look in the mirror to find the true villain. The media frenzy that followed did little to salvage Drew's already fragile reputation. In the aftermath, Drew was livid, not at Cody or Tracy, but at Martin, whose public blunder painted Drew as desperate and disingenuous. Back at General Hospital, Martin sought medical care for his back while Drew stewed over the potential cancellation of his wedding to Willow. With his name once again dragged through the mud, he feared the worst, losing Willow and their unborn child permanently. The pressure mounted until Kai made a bombshell confession. He knew about Curtis's plot to retrieve Jacinda and convince her to speak out against Drew. Kai, perhaps feeling guilty or merely aware of the deeper implications, wanted Drew to know so he could prepare for another betrayal. At the same time, Tracy met privately with Brooklyn and confessed that the entire performance by Cody had been orchestrated by Michael. The revelation that Michael was pulling strings behind the scenes only deepened the mystery. What was his endgame, and how far was he willing to go to tear Drew and Willow apart? Nina, never one to miss an opportunity, tried to leverage the situation with Carly. She proposed that if Carly could convince Michael to allow Willow more visitation time with the children, Nina wouldn't object, even if Drew was excluded. Her real motive, however, became crystal clear when she coldly asserted that Willow didn't need Drew to be a mother and predicted that the unraveling of Drew's reputation would soon fracture their relationship. Carly, disgusted, refused to help, convinced that Drew was still pulling the strings for Willow, and perhaps using her vulnerability to manipulate her. Back at the Quartermain mansion, Michael made his position brutally clear. If Willow went through with marrying Drew, he would ensure she never saw their children again. Willow, undeterred and composed, saw through his threats. She accused him of fearing that she might win custody in court and vowed not to back down. If she succeeded, she would treat Michael with more compassion than he deserved, she claimed, but her resolve was set. When she mentioned traveling to Germany again to gather documents that could support her custody claim, Michael exploded, insisting he would never allow it. Michael's contempt for Drew boiled over, branding him as a fraud and a manipulator. But Willow, now more than ever, stood firm in her defense of the man she planned to marry. With a new fire in her voice, she vowed to reclaim her children and move forward with Drew, regardless of the consequences. And as the day drew to a close, it was clear that no secret would stay buried for long in Port Charles. The battle lines were drawn. Lies were collapsing under the weight of exposed truths. And while some clung to power through manipulation and threats, others were ready to burn everything down just to build something real from the ashes.